Hey, superstars. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Aaron Zakowski, and today I'm chatting with Nick Jordan. Nick is a SaaS marketer and SEO expert with some unexpected strategies for growing organic web traffic for B2B companies. His LinkedIn profile states that he's grown his site from 0 to 1.5 million monthly organic visits in just 2 years. Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Really excited to be here. Been looking forward to it all week.
Yeah, great to have you on the show. Just to kick us off, would love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, for sure. So my claim to fame is I took this project from 0 to 1.5 million organics a month without building backlinks or doing any technical BS. And they were able to use that campaign to go from a seed stage to a 210 million valuation by A16. But I've used the same strategy 4 other times to go from 0 to 100,000 organics a month. And for the SaaS founders that stick around and listen to the end, you're going to find out why SEO has never been more approachable than it is today.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you, I'm excited to learn more, from my own personal SEO strategy with my blog and marketing my agency. Content creation has always been a challenge.
Yeah.
I've always struggled with it. And, because of that, I think we don't get nearly as much organic traffic as we probably could and should, right? So I would love to learn, what the strategies are and how we can implement them and how some of our listeners can implement it as well for their companies. I'll start off. I mean, my first curiosity is, it seems like, I guess it's so late in the day, like for all the core keywords that we would want to, top of the funnel, want to be ranking for, it's just so hard to compete with the big companies that are already there. I know you've got some unique strategies in how SEO works, but what would you say to someone who just thinks it's too hard to compete on the hard words?
I would say that might be accurate if you're a cancer lawyer, cancer lawsuit lawyer,
Uh-huh.
or you're working in car or home insurance, or really like the hardest verticals to work in. But I haven't found that most businesses don't work in those verticals. Most businesses might work in what they consider hard, but it's actually not too difficult to get it done.
Okay. So I guess before we get into the details, let's hear your approach, because I know I've heard a little bit from you. You've got a unique approach. You're saying no backlinks, no technical BS. So what is your secret sauce? How do you get it done and get these great results?
Yeah, so I'm an average person. I was a sales guy up until a couple of years ago, and when I got into SEO, I knew that I wasn't smart enough to figure out how these whole backlinks things work, and
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't smart enough to do technical SEO beyond clicking buttons in a WordPress plugin. And so I set out to make SEO work for me with the limitations that I kind of know about myself. And I ended up discovering a way to do SEO where you don't need to do backlinks, you don't need to do technical stuff to win. And essentially, it's by focusing on creating more value for the user than any other website that Google could show for the keywords that you want to rank for. And if you think about it, it makes sense. What better metric is there for Google to determine whether one page is better to service or serve the user than another than UX metrics? TikTok uses UX metrics to influence reach. LinkedIn does, YouTube does, Facebook does. All of Google's major competitors use UX metrics to influence platform visibility. Why wouldn't Google?
I mean, that totally makes sense. Um, I guess one of the concerns I've always had when creating content, like obviously I love the idea, put the best pieces of content out there, and obviously that's the stuff that people engage with, and therefore Google is going to want to rank the best. The challenge I've always had with that, though, is as the founder CEO of my agency, I always felt that I needed to create that content, that to be the best ideas out there, it had to come from the experts in the field, and that you couldn't necessarily give that to a content writer who doesn't necessarily have that same intimate knowledge of the industry and the content that they're actually writing about.
Especially in B2B, like good B2B content requires a strong opinion and it
Mhm.
really requires expertise. So, I wrote this case study from 0 to 1.5 million organics a month. And I think at this point between YouTube and the blog, it has maybe 20,000 views. But if someone who wrote that, if someone were to go write that case study without having that same actual experience of implementing it, it's just a
Mhm.
lot less interesting for the reader because it's like, who are you to tell me, this crazy result? And so really it comes down to knowledge transfer and documentation. You need to
Mhm.
get all the strong thoughts and opinions that you have about the industry, why it's broken and why you're making the world a better place, and literally write it out, because you can't hold people accountable to talking about something in a specific way unless you've documented it. And so we've developed this really consistent process to basically extract knowledge from stakeholders' brains and then write it down and hold our team accountable.
I mean, that sounds great. It sounds almost too good to be true, to be honest, because I've tried doing it a bunch of times, but I definitely believe in process and that it can be done.
At this point, it's worked. I think we've written content across 200 different kind of verticals or niches or industries or whatever you want to call it. And so we made it pretty consistent, but I can totally see why a lot of people struggle with it. They're not a content agency. They haven't done it 200 times.
Right. I guess the proof is in the pudding. You've got some incredible numbers in terms of the number of companies you've worked with and the number of content pieces it sounds like you've kicked out.
Yeah. Every project that we've taken on and we have adequate budget and we're able to do this, it's turned out good. Going back to Google's use of UX metrics, Google has that data. They have Google Analytics, of course, but they also have Chrome and Android. And so if they really wanted the user analytic data, the world's most innovative big data company could get it.
So it sounds like, you've spoken about this breadth of so many pieces of content that you create for each project that you're working on, but you've also got quality. So it sounds like you're dealing with both quality and quantity. How do you achieve both of those things at the same time, really? And because I think you're using freelance writers and, offshore writers and things like that, from what I've heard.
So our entire team is non-native English speakers. Ironically, they all speak better English than I do as a native, because they had to actually learn the grammar rules that I immediately forgot after my test in 7th grade. Really, it takes two things. The first is people who care, and then documentation. Every single word of content writing, like code, is a liability to mess something up. Spelling, grammar, positioning, messaging, formatting, all sorts of things. So how do you publish hundreds of thousands of liabilities every single month? Well, honestly, it's really hard, because the easiest thing for your team to do is let things slide. How do you consistently care about every single word when there's just so many of them? So you need the people who care, and then you need the documentation to hold them accountable. If you've ever worked in a team environment or worked in a group environment and you've told those people something, you'll know that 1 month later, most of them don't remember, and those that did remember something differently than what you told them. And so if you want to hold people accountable to something, it needs to be written down. And so there's documentation, across the entire campaign lifecycle.
That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, process and documentation are the key to getting, definitely with an offshore large team, I guess it's the only way to get things done. So tell me a little bit, I guess, what is the method essentially for ranking well? Like, I know you've said generally it's content, it's a lot of content, but it seems like these numbers you're saying, like a given website, if you're going to rank it well and get to tens or hundreds of thousands of organics a month, right? How much content is required for that? Are you publishing daily, weekly? What's the secret sauce there?
More is always better. But, John Mueller recently said, John Mueller is now like the head of Google Search PR, and he's the guy talking to all us SEOs. He recently said, it's hard for me to find a 30-page website authoritative. And if you think about it, he's absolutely right. In 2022, literally anyone on the internet can publish a 30-page website over the weekend. And so if Google were to give valuable keywords to any 30-page website, two things would happen. The first is that Google would send a lot of their users to scummy websites that just got started yesterday, publish their 30 pages, and don't really have a business model. The second thing is that there'd be too much variability in the search results. So you publish your 30 pages, you get access to the high-value keywords. The next day, someone publishes 30 pages, they bump you off. And so if you can publish, content is expensive. If you can publish 200 pages of content, then there must be some sort of business model behind the content investment that customers like. And that's how I kind of try and explain Google's behaviors through, business logic and never technical terms. Who are you going to trust more, like a pet website with 5 pages of content or a pet website with 200? Like, it's just the fact of going through the process means you probably know more than the guys with 5.
And so when trying to write that much content, are you just kind of going long tail, top of funnel, anything related to the industry? Or are these kind of intent focused words that are really related to the product or service that the company is actually delivering?
So what I found is that a lot of businesses think, hey, there's a handful of keywords that I want to rank for, and that's almost never true. When you look at the opportunity to get in front of a qualified audience who has money to give you, generally I found that it's measured in hundreds, if not thousands of pages. And so there's always this debate whether you start at bottom of the funnel and work up, or start at top of the funnel and work down. And I think either strategy is fine. But kind of from a high level, and we have videos that are like super tactical and can walk you through and screen share and tell you where to click. But from a high level, we prepare the keyword lists in Ahrefs. We use Cluster AI to group those keywords into individual pages. And then with the Cluster AI deliverable, you actually have a very formulaic way to optimize content. So you're going to get a main keyword, all the variations that can rank on that same page with the main keyword. And then you can drop the main keyword into places like the URL and the H1, and then the variations and the H2s in the content. And that enables my team of editors who don't know any SEO to optimize content while they're editing. And despite the fact that they don't know SEO, when they follow these formulaic instructions with the Cluster AI deliverables, it just naturally ranks.
That's amazing. So tell me a little bit how you work with your agency clients. What would engagement look like? How much on a given month on a typical engagement for a client? Like how many pieces of content are you putting out?
We'll put out anywhere from 10 to 40 pages a month. And that can scale to hundreds and hundreds of pages, depending on how ambitious the client is and how much VC they just raised. So with the case study that I mentioned, 0 to 1.5 million, we were publishing 600 pages a month. We published over 12 pages on the campaign. Yeah.
And those are long pieces of 1,000 words plus per piece of content.
Yeah, right around there. What we found is that in the beginning, when you're competing from a position of weakness, just try and beat your competitors on everything. More words, more H2s, more internal links, more external links, more media. But as you become like an authority, you can get away with less. And so if you do less, you get more service area because you can just go broader.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And what's the importance of link building these days? Everyone thinks of SEO and you got to get your links right. Am I thinking too old school in that perspective? Does it still really matter?
Yeah, going back to what's like Google's best metric to determine whether one page adds more value than another, I just can't imagine it being backlinks when, the analogy I always give is if I showed you 2 pieces of text and it was in a language you don't speak, let's say it's Klingon, and I just told you the user engagement metrics on each page and you knew that it's about the same topic, you could probably tell me which one's better based off of just the UX metrics. This one has 10 minutes on site, 5 pages visited, a 50% bounce rate. This one has 1 minute on site, a 95% bounce rate, 1 page visited. Like, you don't even have to read it to know, like, this one clearly creates more value for the Klingons. So what I found in 2022 is that, when I do campaigns, websites that have more backlinks and higher DR will go faster and I'll rank better, but it's not necessary. Whatever kind of backlink profile you've accumulated through your general marketing motion should be enough to get a really great outcome. And I've proven it on DR9 websites I took to 100K. I've taken, 3 or 4 DR30 websites to 100K. And so everything that I've seen indicates you don't have to build backlinks. Fascinating.
I mean, that's incredible to know. And I'm just having you answer all my SEO questions at this point, the things I've been thinking about, and hopefully our audience will find this interesting and have the same questions as well. So one of the trends, obviously, that's going on right now, end of 2022, is short video, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, things like that. I know there's obviously people are engaging. There's a lot of talk that especially young people are going straight to these platforms to search for answers rather than going to Google. Is this type of content becoming important in terms of a ranking strategy to be creating short videos in order to rank better in Google?
What I've seen is that when I have video content in my articles, that the content does rank better. And I think it's hard to attribute a percentage of impact to anything or why that is, but I think it's a toss-up between Google owns YouTube and wants to promote assets with YouTube videos, or it drives better user engagement metrics. I think both of those could be.
So it's not necessarily creating your own videos to rank, it's just including embedded videos within the post.
Doesn't even have to be your videos. Yeah. Doesn't even have to be yours. And I think, if you put a TikTok video in there and it was engaging and made sense for the content, that I think Google would promote it, even if it's not hosted on YouTube.
Awesome. Makes sense.
One thing I want to jump in and say is that a user-focused approach to SEO is actually really empowering, because when you talk about backlinks, essentially what you're doing is you're praying to the Google gods. No one really understands backlinks, and like it's very fuzzy, opaque, and you're like, is it even working? But if the best SEO strategy is, well, what's best for my users? One, you're taking control of the outcome, because everything that influences the outcome is within your control. And then two, you have a decision-making framework to address literally anything that comes up during the course of the campaign, even if you don't know the answer or haven't seen it before.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you do any, I know the name of your company is actually contentdistribution.com, right? Do you actually distribute content, or is this more just like publishing, getting it indexed, and just letting Google take it from there? Or do you have a strategy for putting it on social or email or places like that?
We distribute it through Google. For our own content, we have a social strategy, and we'll do one-off things, but social distribution and other kinds of distribution it's not a scalable thing. You have to like figure out a new tactic or hack for each type of content that you're working with.
Makes a lot of sense.
For example, when I was growing Doggypedia from 0 to 100,000 organics a month in 13 months, I figured out a couple Pinterest and Facebook group hacks that allowed me to slam it with social traffic, which made it rank quicker than it would if I just waited for it to accumulate that traffic in search. Those strategies wouldn't work for my agency, and it won't work for my clients. So you have to kind of hack it, and it's just too much work.
Yep, that makes sense. One of the other things I've been curious about, just from an SEO point of view, is I've been posting a lot more on social and on LinkedIn lately, and I think about repurposing that content in some way. Do you have any strategies for taking social content, which you post it on LinkedIn, let's say, people see it for a couple of days, maybe a month, and then it just kind of disappears into the ether and isn't really ranking? Are there ways of taking that content that you're creating on one platform and then adding it to your blog or in some way to be able to get some SEO benefit long-term out of it as well?
I think it's tough. I think basically kind of what the audience is expecting and what they engage with is very different on social than it is on, blogs. So maybe you could go the other way, where you write a blog post and then you can recycle it into social. But I think, typically it's that way, and not, here's a social post, I'm going to try and rank it on Google.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. And I guess one of the questions I have, and I know a lot of people have, is how long does it take to start seeing results? Now, not necessarily getting to 100,000 monthly views, but if someone starts this process, they're publishing 20 pieces of content a month, how long will it take for them to start seeing noticeable increase in terms of that hockey stick going up and to the right?
Yeah, so when we do projects and we can publish 20 pages a month, by the time we publish about the 40 to 50th page, what we'll see is that traffic will grow week over week, 8 out of 10 weeks, and it'll grow month over month, every single month. And yeah, you're right. SEO does take time, but if you can literally see it moving towards the desired outcome every single week, it allows you to be a lot more patient than if your SEO guy is telling you it'll be 6 months before we know if it's working.
Yeah. So you're saying that's not necessarily true, that it takes 6 months when you do it your way?
Absolutely not. No, if you're publishing 20 pages a month, traffic should be growing every single week, because you're just expanding your footprint in the SERPs to such a significant extent that there will be random fluctuations on individual pages and keywords, but in general, overall, the campaign should be consistently moving upwards.
It's interesting. You've definitely got a lot of ideas spinning around in my head right now about this that I hadn't really considered in quite a while. So I appreciate that. Let's talk about writers for a few minutes. Because the strategies all make sense, but the implementation of what you're saying sounds incredibly overwhelming. I know I said 20 pieces of content per month, but like that's a huge amount of content to write, and from process to organization to content ideation to actually having the writers to produce that. I know you've got processes, right? But like, where do you find the writers that can write like that and be able to afford a project of that kind of scope?
So the truth to hiring writers is that it doesn't matter how much you pay or where you recruit from, 95% are unqualified. Writing right now is the lowest barrier work from home job. And so everyone with a crummy job who doesn't want to wake up and go to the grocery store or the gas station where they work is applying to write. But, according to the Department of Education, 54% of Americans have an 8th grade reading level or below. Just limiting your hiring to the US only isn't like a panacea or an oasis.
Yeah.
Really, and then the next hard thing is that writers lie in their portfolio. Really, really bad writers have great portfolios. You hire them, they give you garbage, you fire them, rinse and repeat. And so I actually started a company called Workello, which helps you evaluate hundreds and hundreds of writing candidates. So you're only left with the top 1 to 5%, because it is such a big problem that everybody has, finding good writers.
Yeah. I've hired freelance writers several times over the years, just figuring I'm going to try it again. I'm going to outsource some of my writing, get some content being created. I'll outline my thoughts and things like that. And even when the ideas are coming from me, I never seem to get a result I'm happy with. And 50% of the time, I pay a few $100s for the article, sometimes more than $500 for an article, and then end up not even publishing it because I'm just not happy with the results I get.
I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on content that I couldn't use without a total rewrite before I started testing my writers, before I engaged them on a paid engagement. Mm-hmm. It's all a numbers game. The more writers you test, the more likely you are to find that right mix of quality, experience, capacity, and price. If you only engage with a couple writers and you only test a couple, you're not going to get the best that you can afford. You're going to get the least worst of the handful you talk to. So, if you want better writers, just put more writers in your funnel, test more writers, and you'll end up with better writers.
Makes absolute sense, but for someone who's not really an agency, it sounds a little daunting and unreasonable to think you're going to test 100 writers or something like that.
Workello allows you to do it in 2 minutes. I've spent over the last 3 years, my agency's hired over 100 writers. I've spent probably 1,000 hours thinking about how to hire writers. It's really just a volume game. You put more candidates in, you get better candidates out.
And you're saying that your platform Workello was able to test them very quickly, so you're actually not wasting that much time and money determining who are really the winners.
Yeah. Now the problem is testing writers is really hard unless you can automate everything. So that's what Workello does. Is it steps in to allow you to test hundreds where you couldn't do that via email or via Google form or whatever.
All right, that sounds like something I'm going to have to check out. What else should I be asking about SEO? Like, any important things I've missed before we move on?
So I'll talk about our software stack really quick. So
yeah, sure.
We use Airtable for our content calendar. We use Slight for our knowledge base. It's better than Notion and Google Docs. Grammarly, Zapier to glue everything together, Workello to hire writers, Cluster AI to automate your keyword research, in Slack and Zoom. So I think pretty standard setup.
All right, awesome. So moving on a little bit from SEO, just general, you're a SaaS marketer, you're a founder, you're running your own company. What are your biggest struggles as a marketer growing your business outside of SEO specific things?
Man, what are my biggest challenges as a marketer? I'd say, okay, the one that's driving me the nuts today is post signup attribution. So it's very trivial to track signups to particular pages. Like anyone can do that, but how do you know which user was the one who signed up on that page? And then how do you follow their journey through your product to know when they convert to revenue? So I know that in the last couple of days, we've had 10 conversions from SEO, and I don't know who any of the users are.
Okay. Attribution is definitely one of the biggest struggles that most people I speak with are
post signup attribution. Yeah. How do you do post signup attribution?
How do we do post signup attribution? So, I mean, I guess what you're referring to is understanding which page somebody signed up on, and then connecting that to
user
to down the funnel. So I guess if you could, it's not something we do too much of, because most of the clients that we work with, we're sending to a specific landing page. So there could be a unique form on that page or something along those lines. So it's pretty easy to know 90% of traffic is heading towards certain landing pages. We know which form they filled out. But I think another way that you could potentially do it, you could probably use some hidden fields in the form, then maybe pull in the URL. And so you know which page they submitted their information onto, and then add that to the CRM or your database. And that could be appended onto the record within your database of where they signed up originally. The questions that I always have more is which pieces of content influenced it. So where did they touch before they converted? And maybe between sign up and actual conversion on like a product-led growth type of thing, as opposed to someplace where they're just filling out a lead form.
Yeah, for sure. As the SEO, I want to know which page they entered on, because then I get to claim credit. But for sure, the marketer after me is like, well, which page did they convert on?
Yeah. Well, it's because it's one thing to know what page brought them in from an organic search point of view, but you also want to have a better understanding of which pages influence the conversion. You might be able to pull them in from a whole bunch of long-term keywords, right? But I think a well-organized blog, which I think generally what we're talking about with this type of content, is going to have, I guess, other promotions on the page, like certain case studies you want them to come to, certain other, pillar pieces of content. And even though they came in from long tail, they might go over to certain other core pieces of content directly after that as the second page they visit, and which of those actually influence the conversion, maybe more than the organic page that they entered on.
So how do you solve it today?
I don't. I wish I could. I mean, my agency is mostly focused on paid ads, right? So it's not quite as relevant. We're generally just sending them to a landing page, but there is an element of people click the landing page, but then they go search around a little bit. They go, rummage through the site, read some content, look at the case studies, pricing, etc. And then they might convert to some other field on the website other than the landing page that we originally sent them to. So obviously we want to make sure we're still capturing and attributing that conversion from a different page from the initial UTM parameters that we brought them to on the site. But being able to know what pages as they touch, it's complicated, like you said. I wish there was an easy solution.
Yeah, I mean, paid ads is another thing I struggle with. And sometimes I ask myself if I could trade my SEO skill set for an equivalent in paid ads, would I? And I think the answer is for sure, yes. Like this whole SEO thing takes a long time, even when you're really good at it. And I just like the ability for ads to just drive instant traction into your SaaS.
Yeah, listen, I think there's a trade-off. I mean, I didn't expect the conversation to go this way, but it's an interesting conversation. I think the grass is always greener, right? So when people come to me for SEO, I generally will tell them, maybe go run some Google ads for a short bit, figure out which keywords actually are going to convert, right? This is more like a sample to identify what are the valuable keywords to you. And then that you're not going to go spend 6 months or a year ranking for a keyword just to discover, oh, it's not going to convert like you thought it did, right? Now that might be a little bit different than your strategy, where you're just going so broad that you're just going to go after every keyword, and you're not focusing on 1 or 2 keywords just to get them up to the top, right? So that's a little bit different. But then, as an agency owner, from one agency owner to another, I think the challenge is, when I sell an agency client on paid ads, I'm going to charge them, our retainer fee generally starts around $5,000 a month. But on top of that, they've got to have an ad budget, right? Yep. So I might be selling 5,000, but they're going to be putting another $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to get started on that. So it's actually a much higher sell to be able to get a company to want to invest in. It's true, you're going to have more immediate results, right? This is investing in the now. As an SEO agency, I would imagine if a client comes and pays you, let's say $5,000 for a project, you're taking the $5,000. You don't need to now tell them, okay, and on top of that, you got to go pay for $10,000 more in ads. It's like that's the whole cost involved in the project. But the results are going to take a little bit longer to get there. So I think there's just always pros and cons in both the different markets.
Speaking from agency owner to agency owner, one of the other things I'm jealous of is to scale that paid spend. You probably don't need like too many other people. Maybe the single, ad buyer can scale to 100K a month in ad spend. In order for me to scale to 100K a month in SEO spend, I need a giant team. So many people, so many writers, so many editors, so many PMs. And so I'm kind of jealous of your business model.
Again, so pros and cons. You as the agency owner need to have a bigger team in order to scale that up.
Yeah.
If you look at it from not maybe an agency, but from the business's point of view, if they're going to scale up tremendously with paid ads, they need to put a whole lot of money into that, right? It's dollars, it's not people that you're going to do. From the work that needs to get done, in addition to the budget on the paid ads, there is still a bit more work, probably not as much as producing, huge volumes of content. But as you're spending more on paid ads, you also need a lot more creative. And you're going to have to recycle through that creative much more frequently, because if you're spending $10,000 a month, frequency might be, 1.3 per month, average times that people are going to see that ad in the course of a month. But when you ramp that up to $50,000, $100,000, still with the same relative size of audience, which is typically the case in a B2B world, like we're not doing direct to consumer. We've got tens of millions of people that we're targeting in most cases, right? There's maybe hundreds of thousands or a couple small million people that we're targeting, right? Those ads are going to burn out over time, and continuing to find new creative, and on top of that also other marketing efforts, continuing to put out content, continuing to build the brand, continuing with thought leadership to help those conversions over time is also a critical piece of it. So
the grass is definitely greener, I think.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was not where I expected us to go, but that was an important conversation and good perspective. Let's jump into our lightning round. A couple quick questions, a couple quick answers at the end, and then wrap things up. So first question I would ask you is, what book would you recommend for our listeners to read?
What book?
A book.
Oh man.
Are you a reader?
Yeah, I'm a reader. Voracious. Man, it's about power or something. It's Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits. So the thing I like about Atomic Habits is like small little changes every single day add up to very significant changes over long periods of time. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from Naval Ravikant. He said careers are measured in decades, not months or years. And I think it's all about the small things that you do day in and day out.
Right. That's a great recommendation. In fact, I think several people on our last 27 episodes we've done on this podcast have also mentioned it. So you're in good company.
Right.
What's your favorite marketing or productivity tool right now?
I love Airtable. It's like Google Sheets on steroids. You know, you can just manipulate data so easily. You know, prior to Airtable, you had to build in all these complicated formulas into Google Sheets to kind of get it to do what you wanted to do. And all it's done via the UI via Airtable. I think like it's such a genius product. It's probably one of my favorite. No, the favorite.
Okay, awesome. And who's your favorite marketer or business leader that you're learning from these days?
Oh man, that's a great question. There's so many good ones. Who am I really loving? You know who I'm loving is I'm loving Sam Parr and Sean Curry. Like
Love
I
it.
can get
The
enough
best.
of the My First Million podcast. Like I feel like I've watched so many episodes. Like I just keep on scrolling for one I haven't seen before, and I haven't found one in a while. And I feel like the 2 a week that they're doing isn't enough. I feel like we deserve more. And
Right.
like
If anybody didn't hear the name of the podcast, My First Million Podcast. It's actually one of my favorites. I've got two podcasts that I listen to religiously and almost never miss an episode. I know it's about you, but I'm going to tell you my favorite also. One of them is My First Million. The other one is All In Podcast. So those
that's
two
my
are
second
the two
favorite.
best that I never miss any of those.
That's my second favorite. I go to YouTube every day and I refresh, wondering if they're going to give me a new podcast. And I know that it only comes once or twice a week, and I still do it. That's how much I love it.
Yeah, that's how I spend all my car time. I do podcasts rather than YouTube, but those are my two favorites. That's awesome. And last question is, where can listeners go to learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a 7,000 person Facebook group called Fat Graph Content Ops. You can go to linkedin.com, LinkedIn/in/Nick from Seattle. And then you can go to workello.com, and we have 7,000 word guides on how we do what we do. We share all of our secrets. It's very tactical, actionable, tells you where to click and everything.
Awesome. Well, I recommend that everybody go and check out all those resources. Clearly, we've learned that Nick has a lot to share with us. So thank you for joining us today. It's been an awesome episode. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the listeners have also.
Thank you so much, Aaron.